When Army National Guard soldiers make the decision to serve, it is to serve their country and their communities.
And I never feel like a greater sense of pride than, when I put on this uniform and give back to the same community that helped get me here. So
serving their communities in the Army National Guard means staying in their community, living their lives where and how they want. Serve part-time in the community you live in as a proud member of the Army National Guard. Talk to your local recruiter or visit nationalguard.com.
What's going on, everyone? This is Staff Sergeant Noto with the United States Army National Guard. We're down here right now in beautiful Indianapolis, Indiana. We're a block from Monument Circle. I'm here with my friend, Staff Sergeant Greg Johnson and Sergeant First Class. What's your name again?
Joshua Stephens.
Joshua Stephens. He is with the Indianapolis RSP. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you're with Recruiting Command?
Yes, sir.
And what do you guys do with the National Guard?
Want to go ahead, Sergeant Stephens?
Yeah, sure. So when a recruiter enlists a warrior, he or she will be assigned to a specific det in the Indiana area, and then mine's Indianapolis, so we have the largest one in the state. They'll come there. We'll make sure their paperwork's correct. We'll make sure they get the proper training, and we ship them off to basic training. And when they come back from all of their training, we make sure they get through your unit properly. That's
very cool. I do want to touch back on that basic training here in a second. Sergeant Johnson, what do you do for the National Guard?
So to get soldiers to that point with Sergeant Stephens, it is my job to make sure they're fully qualified, do all their paperwork, make sure they get to MEPS where they take a physical and an ASVAB, they swear in, and then they get to the RSP and they start training and getting ready for basic training.
That's very cool. So I've actually queried Guard Nation. I've got the top 15 or so questions that recruiters across our 54 states and territories get asked by prospects, by applicants. So if it's okay with you guys, I kind of want to ask you all those questions. Now, you just touched on what are the requirements, making sure someone's qualified. So what are some of the requirements for someone to apply and then enlist into the United States Army National Guard?
So we have a series of questions that we typically ask people that are interested in joining to make sure that they meet all the basic requirements. So we have to talk about age. Are they between the ages of 17 and 35? Do they have any medical conditions? Have they ever had asthma, stuff like that? If they ever had any issues with the law? We talk about if their education level. They got to be a high school diploma or have a GED. Then we talk about if they've been married, how many tattoos, how many kids. Those are the basic types of questions that we ask applicants to make sure they're fully qualified.
Now, you just mentioned high school diploma or GED. Is it possible, if you are still in high school, to enlist in the Army National Guard?
Correct. You can be 17 and a junior, and you just have to be in good standing at your high school, on track to graduate on time, and you can join.
Is there a good reason that you should actually join while you're still in high school versus waiting until you graduate from high school or college, for instance?
Unlike other components of active duty, the National Guard will start paying you right away.
Really?
Yes. As soon as you join and you do your first drill, you'll start getting a paycheck right away. And that's a difference that the other components or branches cannot offer.
Well, also your time starts too.
Yep.
Now, your time starts. What does that mean?
So the enlistment time, typically it's a 6x2, so 6 years doing your traditional drills, 1 week in a month, 2 weeks in the summer, and then 2 years in active. The day you sign your contract with the Indiana Army National Guard is the day your time starts. So you could be a high school junior, sign that contract, go to basic training between your junior and senior year, come back, and you've already done a year. By the time you get to your AIT, and you can talk about that later, they've already done almost 2 years in the National Guard, and they haven't even got out of high school yet.
And they're getting paid for that whole time, right?
They're getting paid for that whole time.
What's what they can look at for a drill weekend? What would that salary look like? What would that pay be? Those pay and benefits?
I actually just saw one of my warriors' pay stubs because they had a question about it. And for a Saturday and a Sunday, after taxes, she brought home, I think it was $175.
Now, what's a warrior?
That's someone that has enlisted into the Indiana Army National Guard, but has not gone to basic training yet. So
someone that's basically in the initial active duty training phase?
Yep.
That's very cool. What do you guys do for the drill weekend at the RSP, the Recruit Sustainment Program?
Saturday morning, where they typically come in, and we do what's called a formation, where that's kind of like an accountability thing. They come in, we make sure they're there, make sure they have all the required stuff that they asked them to come bring. We do what's called a PT test. We have all the recruiters that are assigned to the Indiana det give them that PT test, and then we have cadre that kind of give them training classes throughout that whole weekend. And typically on the Sunday, they get released about 11 or 12 on Sunday because they have school and sports and stuff like that. So we make sure that school aspect is still important to them when they're still in school.
That's very cool. That's awesome. Now, what are are there different phases then? Does everyone go to the exact same thing? Who all is in these drills?
So that's a good question. Red phase, we have so many phases. So red phase is the initial phase. So when they come to drill, they don't know what they're doing. They don't know where to stand, stuff like that. We do that red phase. So we bring them in, we teach them initial classes, we show them how to march, we show them, just the basic stuff. And then once they make through that first phase, that's what's called white phase. Those are the ones that they are not getting ready to go to training yet, but they're still coming to drill every month. They'll do the classes, they'll do the PT tests, they'll do all the exercises and the movements and stuff like that. We do a lot of team building exercises. And the ones that are actually getting ready to leave, we call that's blue phase. Blue phase is those ones that are, hey, they're getting ready to ship this month. They've got to have specific classes. We've got to make sure that all of their paperwork's good. If they have a lease or a mortgage, we pay for that when they're gone. So there's a lot of stuff we have to make sure of. And for the most part, those are all the phases. The green phases is one more. That's the people that have actually gone to basic training, have come back for their senior year, and they're waiting to go to AIT. So those are the majority of the phases that we deal with.
Now, Sergeant Stephens, you just mentioned that we pay for their lease and mortgage. Could you clarify that? Does the National Guard pay them directly, or how does that work?
So what happens is if you have a legitimate, and I say legitimate, lease or mortgage, not a note that says, hey, mom's paying me, or I'm paying mom $300 or something like that. It's got to be a legitimate lease from an apartment or a mortgage,
Mm-hmm.
from a bank. You'll turn that in. We have what's called basic allowance housing that every active duty soldier would receive once they're on active duty training. So it depends on where they live, depends on the training base, and it's all different stipends of money. But they'll get a stipend of money that's essentially an entitlement for their mortgage. And sometimes it's more than what they're actually paying for rent, so they can just pocket the rest of that money.
That's very cool. So they're basically getting paid because they get base pay while they're at training, and that's around how much?
It depends on the rank, honestly. You're talking about, E1 to E4 majority of the time. And the rank, the pay-wise, it's going to be a little different. So, for the most part, a soldier or somebody could make almost $2,000-$3,000 every month just doing training. And what you're not talking about is, basic training. They're getting their food paid for, they're getting their housing paid for, they're getting all their clothes paid for. So they're literally not paying anything. They're not spending any of that money while they're doing training.
That's very cool. That actually leads very well into the next question, which is how long is BCT? And BCT, of course, is basic combat training. Do I get days off in basic combat training?
So basic combat training is 9 weeks and 4 days, with a period before that for in-processing. It's kind of broken down in the same phases that RSP's broke down into: red phase, white phase, blue phase. I wouldn't say you necessarily have days off in basic training, but there are days where you get to do laundry, call home, write letters, stuff like that. But that entire time in training, you'll pretty much be training every day, but there will be slower days. We all see the military movies of drill sergeants yelling and lots of push-ups, sit-ups, running, but what really occurs in basic combat training? So I think it's been a long time since the three of us went to basic training.
That's true. That's true.
But
That's true.
The overarching theme, in my opinion, for basic training is warrior task and drills. Those are going to be the first things you're going to want to learn while you're there. Team building, how to work with the people on your squad or your platoon. And then I'm drawing a blank. Towards the end, you have the blue phase, and then you have
That's a total culmination of all their skills, right?
Yeah,
They're doing
yeah.
FTX out in the field.
Culminating event and stuff like that.
Yep, and you're getting graded on that. And then at the end, you're considered a United States Army soldier, and you've built up to that point over those 9 weeks and 4 days.
Where do you go after basic training? Do you come back here to Indiana?
Depends on where you're at.
Yep.
If where you're at in the training process. If you're a junior, you come home and you go back to high school. If you're post high school graduate, you're going to your AIT, your job training, whatever job you pick, whenever you signed up. You're going to go to that training base. It could be a different base, could be the same base, and you're going to learn your military job.
What does AIT stand for? I'm sorry.
advanced individual training.
And that's your MOS, your military occupational specialty, depending on the job you choose.
Yes, sir.
How many jobs are there in the National Guard?
All the jobs.
All the jobs.
All the jobs.
How many? What are the? Can you guys give an example of some of the jobs that you've seen here in the Indiana Army National Guard?
So Indiana, a lot of 11 Bravos, 11 Charlies.
What are those?
Infantry.
Okay.
Or combat arms jobs. So a lot of logistics jobs. So you have truck drivers, logistics supply specialists. There's communications jobs that deal with radios. We have medical field. So you have basically Army paramedics.
Very cool.
I would say this equivalent there. What other jobs are there, Sergeant Stephens? Big ones.
Some of the ones that were coming up that are kind of hot and heavy right now, like the cyber battalion and stuff like that. So, Indiana's getting ready to have a cyber battalion. So there's a lot of what's called 25 series jobs, which are more like IT focused and stuff like that. That's kind of a hot thing right now. We've got a lot of. Did you say 13 series?
I did not.
So there's like 13 series and field artillery and all that stuff. It's starting to become more of a thing in Indiana. Indiana is known as a combat arms state. So infantry, like you said, is going to be one of those big ones, and those typically are attached to bonuses. But there are other jobs. You don't have to just. I think everybody, sometimes people envision a soldier as like, oh, I'm on the front lines. No, there's so many jobs, and there's so many soldiers that are needed in other places than to be on the front lines. I mean, there's like IT and medical and fixing vehicles and all kinds of stuff that possibilities you could do with the Indiana Army
Stuff you
National
don't
Guard.
see in the movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's very cool. You brought up two things that I want to circle back to later, which was bonuses and what is the mission of an Indiana National Guardsman, an Indiana Army National Guard soldier. What are your guys' MOSs? I should have asked that earlier. I'm sorry I didn't.
So my first MOS when I joined was 88 Mike, which is truck driver. That's what I deployed as. And then I got a second MOS, which is 92 Alpha, which is automated logistics. And then I'm currently a recruiter, which is hybrid MOS that you won't really get.
So I'm going to date myself. My first MOS was a 91 Bravo, which was originally a medic, combat medic.
Wow.
And then it transitioned to 68
whiskey.
No, 91 whiskey, then 68 whiskey.
That's right.
So I was at 68 whiskey, then I transitioned to 11 Bravo, which is infantry. And then a couple of years ago, I went to recruiting school, so I have a recruiting MOS as well. So typically, it's not unlikely to have multiple MOSs or jobs in the Indiana Army National Guard if you're in more than 6 years, I would say.
Yeah, agreed.
So we talk a lot about the Army National Guard. What is the Army National Guard? Is it the same thing as the Army Reserves?
There's similarities and differences. Big differences is Army Reserve is a federal organization. So they're getting their money from the federal government directly, and they are their boss is the president. That's the top of their food chain. With the National Guard, each state has control of its own National Guard. So Indiana Army National Guard, Ohio Army National Guard, Michigan Army, everyone's got their own. And their boss is the governor. That's who they answer to directly for emergencies, stuff like that. And there's also state funding that goes in on top of the federal funding with the Army National Guard.
So does your pay come from the state or from the federal government?
Well, as far as like drill pay?
Correct.
You want to answer that, Sergeant Stephens? I don't really know where it comes from exactly.
Drill pay or so typically when you're on active duty, that's going to become federal. I mean, essentially most of it's all federal because
it's coming from Congress.
It's coming from Congress. So different pots of money. Most of the time, if you're putting on like state active duty orders, you're getting paid by the state. That money still comes from the federal government typically. Weekend drills, AT, that's going to be usually state money. And then if you're going to go on deployments, you're going to go to basic training, AIT, all that's going to be active duty money.
So there's just different pots of money.
Different pots of money.
How long you been in the military? In the National Guard?
19 years.
And you've been in the Army National Guard 19 years. How long you been in?
11 years.
Have you ever seen it where the Army National Guard ran out of money and didn't pay somebody?
Not one time.
Not one time.
I've gotten a paycheck every single month for 11 years.
There was actually a period when I was on active duty Army back in 2011 where, if I recall correctly, the federal government ran out of money and we didn't get paid, but the National Guard still got paid.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know there's that rumor that the National Guard runs out of money a lot because it's state funded, and I think we can put that rumor to rest right here, right now.
Absolutely.
Now, you mentioned that the Army National Guard's boss is the governor, for us, Governor Holcomb.
Yep.
Does that come with additional benefits, additional missions, or is it the same as the Army Reserves and active duty or regular component Army as far as the mission and benefits?
So mission, Indiana's got National Guards in general have two missions. They got a state mission and a federal mission. State mission is coming first. So here in Indiana, we're going to answer to tornadoes, floods, snowstorms, stuff like that. We're going to help the community in which we live and serve. That's our first mission. And then if the federal government deems it necessary to activate a National Guard unit, then we also have a federal mission.
That's very cool. Now, I know I asked about benefits a little bit ago. So is it fair to say that the National Guard has the most benefits?
I think that would be fair to say.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I know one of the big benefits that the National Guard, the Army National Guard likes to push is the up to 100% of college tuition assistance. Now, I know there's something called FTA, which is federal tuition assistance, and then there's state TA, right? State tuition assistance, which for Indiana is going to be the National Guard supplemental grant, right?
Right.
How does that work?
So I used all of those while I was in college. So federal tuition assistance, $4,500 a fiscal year, $250 a credit hour. All of that's very fine print stuff, and that up to 100% can be misleading by the federal money. That's going to pay for like a community college typically, but if you go to a state school here in Indiana, IU, Purdue, Ball State, probably not going to cover all your tuition.
Yep.
So the Indiana Commission for Higher Education has a grant called the National Guard Supplemental Grant, and that's going to cover the difference. That's going to say, hey, you have tuition that's $6,000. I don't know, making up numbers. You've capped out your federal tuition assistance. National Guard Supplemental Grant's going to make up that difference.
So essentially, you could get a bachelor's degree from IUPUI, IU, Purdue, Ball State, wherever, any state school, and not have any student debt.
$0 out of your pocket.
Yep.
Does the Army Reserves or any other component qualify for that National Guard supplemental grant, or is that just for the National Guard?
It's just for Indiana Army National Guard soldiers.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, you mentioned you use those educational benefits yourself. What is your level of education?
I have a master's degree from IU.
And how much student debt do you have?
I have $0 in student debt.
Sergeant Stephens, how about yourself?
I have about 98 college credits. So
But do you have any student debt?
I have 0 student
That's
debt. To give a perspective, my wife is 36 years old. She's got 2 bachelor's
You just said
degrees.
that on the microphone.
I know.
Oh
I know,
my!
I know.
She's
It's fine.
26
It's
years
fine.
old.
She's 36 years old. She is she is one of the behavior therapists at New Pal School Corporation. So she's got 2 bachelor's degrees and she's got a master's in applied behavioral analysis. We're almost done paying off her student debt.
Oh, man.
And she said multiple times, I wish I would have joined the National Guard because I wouldn't have to deal with all this debt. I'm like, I know, me too. But it gives you a good example because there's a lot of people that have student debt, and it's a really big thing, especially nowadays.
That's a good question. So let's say someone is 22, 23 years old. They've just graduated from one of our fine educational establishments here in the great state of Indiana.
That's right.
And they've got $50,000 in student loans. Now, I understand that we're not going to pay for their school because they weren't in the National Guard when they acquired that student debt. But is there something that the National Guard can do to help them pay off that student debt? Or is there, I've heard of a student loan repayment program. Is that a thing?
Yeah, that absolutely is a thing. We have what's called the Student Loan Repayment Program. It goes up to $50,000 of federal student loans. I believe it can't be like a private loan. It's got to be a federal, like Stafford loan, for
Right.
instance. But yeah, if someone has those loans, they're in good standing, they're not in default, and they qualify for the Student Loan Repayment Program, the National Guard will pay up to $50,000 of their student loans.
That's very cool. That's very cool. It looks like one of our fine gentlemen is getting a parking ticket. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that is. The other fine gentleman said, "Oh, you won't get a permit." They're not actually doing that right now.
Yikes!
So that was determined to be false. That's fine. I will pay it.
We've talked about the differences between the National Guard and the Army Reserves and the regular component of the Army as far as benefits go. Now, is the National Guard the same thing as the Army?
As far as training goes, yes.
Are they the same component or are they the same branch?
So
what are they?
The United States Army is the overarching organization, right? And it has 3 components underneath it. It's got the active duty Army, United States Army Reserve, and the National Guard. They get the same training. They get the same federal benefits as far as FTA, stuff like that. But then the National Guard has that extra money on top of it from the state.
Is there anything you want to add to that, Sergeant Stephens?
He's pretty much covered on that point. So
Very cool. Earlier today, you talked about bonuses. what are the bonuses for the National Guard? And we talked about, you make $200 to $300 a month for drill. Obviously, you make $2,000 to $3,000 a month while you're training. Is there any additional incentives you can get, both fiscally and education-wise?
Do you want to talk about that since you're still a recruiter? It could have changed. I'm sure it hasn't.
So the bonus is we have a $20,000 bonus for the top 10 MOSs in the state, top 10 jobs, the ones that we have the biggest need for. You have to get a 50 or higher on the ASVAB, which is the test you have to take to qualify to join the military. It's a 1 to 99 score, so you have to get over 50, and you pick one of those top 10 jobs, you get a $20,000 bonus.
So those guys that say they got 100 on the ASVAB, that's fake news?
That's fake news.
Fake news.
Hashtag
totally fake news.
Now, you need to get a what to get in? I'm sorry, did you mention that?
31.
So you need to get a 31 or higher to get into the Army National Guard. To qualify for a bonus, what score do you need?
50.
50 or above. And you need to be a high school junior, high school grad. What do you need to be to get that bonus administratively besides the 50 or above on the ASVAB?
You have to be well, you can get it as a junior, but you have to finish your training.
Complete training.
Yeah, you have to finish AIT before you get that first installment
Right.
of your bonus.
I'm glad you brought that up, finishing training. Now, do you get any benefits prior to finish? So when you join, do you get any additional benefits the day you raise your right hand, like education-wise?
You can start you can't use FTA yet, right?
That's the federal tuition assistance, right? You don't get anything from the federal government until after you complete training.
Correct.
Right.
But you get what?
I'm not sure.
You get the
tell
National
me.
Guard Set Medal Grant.
Well,
You can use that.
You get, besides the education, you can still get health care.
right, health.
Yeah.
That's great. We got to talk
Yeah,
about that
you
here in a
can get that.
second.
I mean, if you
Day one.
Yeah, like I said, you might have most of what juniors are on their parents' plans and stuff like that.
Yeah,
But you have those
fair.
onesie twosies they need health care, and health care is a huge deal. And I don't know if we're going to talk about that or not, but the price is not comparable. So.
No.
So, what would the cost be for healthcare? You mentioned it's not comparable. Well, what would that, if I was going to sign up for it right now, what would the cost be?
For a single soldier with no dependents, it's something under $50.
It's like
40.
I thought it was 57.
You might be right.
But it fluctuates every single
Every
year,
yeah.
because for one single individual. But I was on that when I was not active duty, and doctor's appointments were free. You paid that one-time fee a month, and then I didn't pay a dime for prescriptions as well.
Yeah.
So
And
that's
then
huge.
Then the family insurance is somewhere in the $250 range, right? It's somewhere up there.
Yeah.
So that's still for
Is that per person or is that what is
that's
what
for
is
your
it?
whole
That's
family.
for the whole
That's
household.
for the service member, the spouse, and all their children.
Yeah, and I'm an older gentleman, that. So I have friends that are, in their 40s that are paying well over $1,000 a month for
Yeah,
healthcare.
absolutely.
For
Not
3
even
or
great
4
coverage either.
Right, not great coverage. So it's a huge benefit.
A moment ago, Sergeant Stephens, you mentioned before you were active duty. Now, you mean active duty Army National Guard?
Correct.
That's a thing?
That is a
Correct.
thing.
Yes.
So if you decide, if I just enlist in the Army National Guard and I decide, hey, I want to go active duty in the National Guard, how hard is that? What are the opportunities available to me on active duty Army National Guard?
There's a couple options. There's quite a few options,
There's quite a
actually.
few.
Yeah, you could go on what's called ADOS. It's short-term active duty orders that can be up to a year long, and that's usually for specific missions or things that the state has going on that they need help with. You can become what's called a federal military technician, which isn't active duty, but you wear the uniform every day. You're doing your MOS usually, and you're getting paid as a federal employee, federal civilian employee. And then you have what the three of us are, which is AGR, Active Guard Reserve Program.
Yep.
So we get the same money, the same pay every month that active duty soldiers get, but we get to do it right here in our home state.
So you get to pick where you're stationed at, essentially.
More or less, yeah.
That's very cool. How hard or easy is it to get a full-time guard career after you enlist?
It's really like a job interview, a normal civilian job interview.
I mean, it also depends on where you're willing to go sometimes in the
Yeah,
state.
that's
I
fair.
mean, if you're Indiana would probably be, I would say Indianapolis, depending on what you would want to do, would be, easier to get your foot in the door as some of the outlying areas. But I always tell people, if you want to be active duty National Guard, you've got to start somewhere. You got to get that ADOS in. You've got to networking's huge. Networking is huge with anything.
With any career, yeah.
With any career, you can't nobody knows you, so you have to get your foot in the door.
Prove yourself.
Show up for work on time. Wear the right uniform, stuff like that. As silly as that sounds, all three of us know how hard that can be for some people, just showing up on time. So,
Absolutely. Now, we've said a lot the term Indiana Army National Guard. So we work for the state. Are you stuck in Indiana?
You don't have to be.
no, you don't have to be.
So you're able to switch states and switch between the 54 states and territories.
I mean, it's not like
It's not the easiest.
it's not like buying a new card. I mean, there's process to
Paperwork.
it, but yeah, absolutely.
But you're not stuck here in Indiana.
No,
if you want to go down to Florida in the Florida Army National Guard.
sure, absolutely.
Very cool. This is a common question that recruiters get, as silly as it may sound. Do I have to enlist in the military?
Yes.
So in order to get these benefits that the National Guard has, the Army National Guard,
Yes.
you have to enlist in the military, correct?
Yes, the Indiana Army
Yes,
National Guard
you do.
is a component of the United States military.
Now, the oldest component, right?
It is the oldest.
Established December 13th, 1636, if I remember correctly.
Look at you, history buff.
Yeah, he knows for sure.
That's very cool. That's very cool. What other things do you think we should talk about? Is there anything else that you guys like to mention to anyone that's watching this, possibly thinking about a career in the Army National Guard, something that they should maybe ask a recruiter, or something that you feel they should know about the Army National Guard?
If they're working with a recruiter, just make sure that you're getting all your questions answered. There's not a stupid question.
I was going to say that.
Like
Yeah.
a lot of these might sound like silly questions that you should just know, but we know because we do this every day. If you have a doubt in your mind, ask the question. That
Ask
recruiter
questions.
has a government phone that they can text you back and to be
Absolutely.
like, "Here's the answer." Don't have a doubt in your head before you raise your right hand. Make sure you have the answers to all your questions.
Educate yourself, ask the questions, and understand because everybody's heard the horror stories. Oh, my recruiter did this or that, and that's just National Guard across the board. So I always tell people, ask questions. If you don't know something, ask. Educate yourself on all that stuff. There's a lot of stuff that like I said, if we don't know the answer, we'll find out for you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we could circle back around to, you talked about college, and a lot of times, and hopefully you can talk a little bit about this, you can get paid to go to college, essentially.
That's a great point, yeah.
Yep.
We didn't really talk about that much. You can talk about you're getting that stipend money, but also you're getting your drill pay, you're getting other stuff. And we didn't talk about potentially how much money they can make just going to school and working 2 days a month.
So whenever I was at IU getting my undergrad, I got over 50 on the ASVAB, so I was able to get the GI Bill kicker and a bonus. And we didn't even talk about that. So I was going to school full time, not paying my tuition, getting a drill check, so about $200, getting what's called the Montgomery GI Bill, Chapter 1606. That is, at the time, I don't know what it was. Right now, it's $392 a month. And then the GI Bill kicker, which is an additional pot of money, just $350 a month. I was getting all that direct deposit into my checking account every single month, just to be a full-time student, getting good grades, doing the right thing. I didn't have to get a part-time job to make ends meet. I didn't have to stress about things. I was able to focus on my grades, focus on school, and I honestly was living pretty comfortably for a 19-year-old college kid.
Right.
With no student debt.
Yeah.
Now, is that money taxed?
To be honest, I don't know.
So I don't. If I
the drill pay is taxed.
Drill pay is taxed,
but
correct.
the GI Bill is not taxed, and neither is the kicker bonus. It shouldn't be.
No, if I remember correctly, that's actually accurate.
It's almost like I think now for a basic soldier E1 with kicker and GI, it's like almost $900 a month.
Yeah.
to go to school full time.
Just to be
and to work for us for 2 days,
2 days.
a month.
Yeah.
So if I understand you correctly, I can go to drill 2 days a month, a Saturday and Sunday, once a month, 39 days a year,
Yep.
because you have your AT, your annual training. Go to college full time, study whatever I want to study. There's no degree requirement, right? I can study underwater basket weaving, is the Army saying.
Sure.
As long
study
as that school has it, yeah.
It's a 2.5 GPA requirement. Is
Good
that
point.
correct?
That's a good
For your
point.
undergrad, and then it's a 2.7 or 2.8 for your master's. Is that correct?
So I use post 9/11 GI Bill, and I won't get all of that, and that was 3.0.
3.0, I'm sorry. And that's for your master's, correct?
Yeah.
Phenomenal. And I can make almost $1,000 a month going to school full time.
Yep.
And that's not even touching on ROTC or anything like that.
No.
That's absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, it's wild.
Is
And people don't believe you, I feel like.
No, I mean, but you're living proof.
I wish I could go back 10 years and show my bank account as a 19-year-old kid.
Yeah.
It was wild.
That's awesome.
It's
Any closing statements? We've got just under a minute left. Is there any closing statements that either of you would like to make to anyone that's out there listening to this?
I'm good.
You good? I'd just say that you would have told me I'd be in this seat 20 years ago, I'd tell you you're crazy. Honestly, I don't regret anything I've done with the Indiana Army National Guard. It's been great. Got to see a lot of the world, and I've got to meet a lot of awesome people. And I mean, it's all about building those relationships, and it's been great so far.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you, Staff Sergeant Johnson, and you, Sergeant First Class Stephens. Once again, my name is Staff Sergeant Noto with the United States Army National Guard. It's been great talking to you guys. Until next time, thank you.